Hello, so this is Bennett Foddy's Getting Over It game a lot of people are familiar with. It sort of blew up in popularity pretty crazily a little bit after it was released. I think the streamers started getting onto it and it took off in a pretty big way, which is it's pretty unusual for a game like this. That's there's nothing else really like it, at least in the mainstream. It's very unique. It's a real classic Bennett Foddy game, maker of Quap, which a lot of people would be familiar with as well. Quap was a game where you control like a jogger or a sprinter rather, with the QWOP keys, and each key sort of controlled one of the runner's limbs. Um, he had other ones. He had another one called GURP, which was a similar premise to Quap, but you were a rock climber, and each rock was bound to a different key on the keyboard. Sort of reminded me of those old typing games, but it was I thought that was an awesome game. You sort of, the dude reached for the keys or the rocks rather, as you pressed the key that corresponded to whichever rock. So I'd recommend checking that out. I think I think you just play it for free on his website. Um, so he did that, and then he had a couple of he has a fair few other little games, like a little cricket game where you control the cricket bat with your mouse, much like you control the hammer in this game with your mouse. So all these games have like this similar theme of like a tangible sort of controls, very often controlled by the mouse. Well, no, Quap and GURP not so much, but controlled with physics, I suppose. With actual like real time physics, which I'm a sucker for. I love those sort of games. Getting over it is, I guess, his biggest undertaking so far, and it's a bit tricky. I'll get it eventually, but getting over it is, as you might have heard in the narration, and you've probably played the game yourself if you're watching this. It's a homage to an old indie game called Sexy Hiking, which he just said. So as he is explaining in the background, it's the same premise as this game. This is obviously a much more polished version. You're simply dragging yourself up these series of mismatched obstacles with this hammer while you're stuck in this cauldron. So this is the first, probably infamous bit where a lot of people get stuck, myself included. They're called the Devil's Chimney. The trick to this bit is to normally just put yourself there and then do a little launch with the hammer. Not do that, but you can probably see what the idea is. I remember being stuck in this bit for probably over 2 hours when I first played this. But the thing about this game, he's also talking about this in the narration right now, but it's very difficult, and I really like difficult games, but that's not me trying to be like, oh, I'm such a hardcore gamer. I love difficult. I'm not a masochist, but I do love challenge in games. But I think it's. And that can be like working with quickset cement. Oops. You mold your ideas into a certain shape. Sorry, I'm just gonna turn his voiceover down for the time being. The subtitles are still there, and not sure what's going on with the settings because that just changed my graphical settings as well. But anyway, it's no big deal. So the difficulty is he says it in the narration as well. It's not. The point of the game isn't to be difficult. The point of the game, the difficulty is it's par for the course with how the game's designed. The difficulty is integral to the gameplay. He talks about, I think, a lot of obstacles in mainstream games or whatever, not just mainstream games. In a lot of games, are essentially fake, in that they're not actual tangible things that you're trying to overcome with your character a lot of the time. A lot of the time they're, oh, you need to get this item, and then you walk up to the obstacle and suddenly you can pass it by hitting it with a certain type of sword or whatever, something like that. Whereas this game gives you all its sort of tools from the get-go, and all it is, the only thing you have is your hammer and your remarkable upper body strength. So you get a feel for it pretty quick. You get a feel for what it's about, but you don't get anything else. It's just you and the hammer, and you got to see how far you can make it with just that. And you don't gain anything better except your own skill at the game improves as you go along, and you sort of get into a rhythm, which is really satisfying once you start getting a feel for how the language of the game and the physics and the way the dude moves around with the cauldron and whatnot. It starts to become really fun, because you're really sort of like learning a sport in real life. It's you start to get you get better as a player, and there's nothing artificial about it. It's just pure, like, your skill improving rather than you artificially getting some item that gives you a sort of false sense of progress. That's not the right word. A constructed sort of idea that you're progressing in a world or whatever, in a virtual world. Whereas this is truly just about how you learning to move the mouse around in a more effective way in order to get this guy up the mountain. And speaking of difficult, I'm coming up to the most infamous part of the game, called Orange Hell, which is the term was coined by a streamer called Rockley Smile. And speaking of which, highly recommend if you find this game interesting, or Bennett Foddy's other games, check out there's a podcast called Roundtable Podcast with a few YouTubers. Northern Lion is among them. Bear Taffy. It's not going on anymore, but Bennett Foddy was on one of their podcasts, and it was really, really interesting to hear him talk about his philosophy behind games and the game industry, which he talks a lot about in the narration in this game as well. But it's a super. I really, as soon as I started playing this game, I really loved it. Basically, it's super unique, and when I'm playing games, I'm always looking for something that I've never experienced before, a different sort of. Just this is something. When I played this, I was like, yeah, I've never played anything like this, and I'm sort of. There were a lot of copycats, but I really think certain games should have thought about. Took that way more slowly. But thankfully I didn't fall all the way down, because as you probably know, it's very easy to fall all the way to the start at multiple points in this game. It's very unforgiving in that regard, which is part of its charm. Your mistakes have real consequences, and Bennett Foddy's voiceover will even interject, give you little tongue-in-cheek lines when you fall sometimes, which is always pretty fun. But what was I saying? I apologise, I forgot what my original train of thought was, but never mind. The narration's an interesting part of the game as well. I really like the dynamic bits where like I just said, he interjects with a little bit of humor about when you mess up and go all the way back to the start. He'll be like, oh, and he'll often offer a quote from a famous quote about. I have a feeling he Googled just a bunch of quotes about pain and put them in the game, because the game is about. Thematically speaking, if you want to get deeper, I perceive it to be about pain and struggle, and there's all these quite poignant quotes that he's put in that are pretty accurately capture the feeling of what it's like to play this game. And you can see me struggling right now. It's a real scramble, at least at first, until you get really familiar with the way the controls work. You can watch. It's one of those games. It reminds me. It's a strange comparison, but it sort of reminds me of Rocket League in that the skill ceiling is quite literally infinite, because there's no real limit to how well you can manipulate the physics in the game to make your gameplay stronger. It's not like, there we go, step one complete. It's not like a lot of games where you learn the mechanics and there's only a certain amount that you can get better at the game. I'm not really trying to think of an example, but like RPGs like Skyrim, The Witcher. I mean, they're not there. Those games are. It's kind of not a great comparison. But my point is, most games have a skills ceiling, right? Have a pretty clear skills ceiling. Whereas maybe skills ceiling isn't even the right word. More like when I watch Rocket League, pros at Rocket League, it's pretty mind-boggling what they're able to do with this very simple premise of the game, which is hit the ball with the car. Much like this is very simple. Drag yourself up a mountain with a hammer. But people get so good at manipulating the very simple systems that the game developers have set out, because the system is actually very deep. Sorry, I just got to concentrate here. Oh, got it. It's actually once you start learning the oh, that's heartbreaking. Almost went all the way down. As you can see, he puts this little sign here to caution you that if you go down there, that's pretty much back to the start of the game. But anyway, yeah. So one of the things I really love about this game is that it's so simple at first glance, and it is simple, but there's so much more to it than meets the eye, and it's really fun to get better at it. I can totally see how a big speedrunning sort of community came up around this game, because I doubt Bennett Foddy built the game with that in mind. Maybe he did, I don't know. But it's built for it, whether intentionally or not. Yeah, it's just I don't know. I love the true tangible sense of progression in getting over it. It's what makes it. It's I don't want to say magical, but it's one of those games. It's nothing like I've ever played. And he talks about B games and calls getting over it sort of a homage to B games, which I find it's pretty interesting, because there's no rhyme or reason to all these obstacles and whatnot. There's a playground for some reason. There's a bunch of cardboard boxes. So later on there's you get to like a snowy area after that really difficult part with the orange, and there's probably the most infamous bit in the game, even though I've said that like 3 times now, is where it's one of those things that's great to look up reaction clips to. It's the bats at the top of the mountain is really hilarious, because the volume's about 10 times louder than it should be, and a bunch of bats fly out. It's certainly scared the crap out of me when I first played it, as it did everyone, and it's a great thing to look at people's reactions to. But and it's just completely out of the blue, and it's right after you've done a tense moment, and people are like dragging the hammer really slowly to like get to it, and then suddenly there's all these bats that like fly out at you, and it's terrifying. But it's hilarious as well. I just need to slow down a bit here. There we go. But it's fun to think about what, even though I don't think Bennett Foddy had any particular story in mind for this Cauldron character, or any backstory. Maybe he did, but I think that's not really the point of the game. But regardless, it's fun to speculate about what's going on in this weird world that this man finds himself in, and how did he find himself in this cauldron? For example, why does a detail I find really interesting is the way that water sort of spills out of the cauldron as you sort of impact hit the ground. Like, why is the cauldron got water in it? That's such an interesting detail to me that I can't think of an answer to that question. Because obviously, like I said, I don't think the point of the game is to be speculating about the lore or whatever, but it's still fun to do. Like, why would there be water in the cauldron? Why did he decide to program that in? I cannot think of an answer. All right, there we go. And it's got some real nice little details, like the sound effects when you hit different surfaces are different. Like the metal, if you hit metal, it makes a clanging sound versus when you hit wood, or cloth or whatever. It's little. It's a small thing, but it adds to the sense of tangibility, if that's even a word, of actually hands-on dragging yourself up these physical obstacles. Even though they're virtual obstacles, they feel more physical than most video game obstacles because, like I said earlier, I wonder if I can do this. Nope. Don't panic. Worst thing you can do in this game is panic and flail your mouse around in a desperate bid to maintain your position, because that'll just get you sent back to the start. So it's all about composure, I think. Oh, that's weird. Never done that before. I think I'll give this one more go, and then might call it. Yeah, that's why I think Bennett Foddy's Getting Over It is a great game, and I love these sorts of physics games, and I hope we see more of them in the future. Which, I mean, we will, but of course we will. But careful. But I hope. Well, what I really hope is that I really wanted him. My dog is freaking out over there. Sorry about that. Oh, you made me fall, dog. That's just excuses. That was my own fault. What was I saying? Yeah, I want him to release like a community level editor. I think that would be. I don't think it's going to happen. The game's been out for 2 or 3 years now or something. So, but man, that would be so cool, I reckon. Or just a sequel. I don't know. I just want more of this game. I love it. I find it so fun. I'm obviously not. This is the hardest part of it. Well, that's actually probably not the hardest part of the game. There's a few trickier parts. But anyway, that's Bennett Foddy's Getting Over It. It's on Steam. Check it out if you haven't already. I'm guessing you already have, but if you like physics sort of focused games, highly recommend it. It's a lot of fun. Very frustrating, but and if you haven't finished it, I'd recommend really finish it by yourself. Don't watch a stream or whatever. Try and if you're patient and you like these sort of games, finish it, because the ending is so worth it. It's so much. It really does give you a sense of accomplishment when you finish it. It's unlike a lot of games in that regard. It's not like, well, credits roll, you finish it. It's really comes back to that, I think, sense of tangibility. I'm gonna have to look that up after this, see if that's actually even a word. But it's well, there we go. I love it. Check it out if you haven't already. Thank you very much for watching. See you next time.